everybody. Today we're going to learn how to pre-flight the H60 Black Hawk Helicopter. I think the primary audience that could take the most away from this are new students that are just getting into aircraft qualification course down at Low Army Heliport down there at good old Fort Novacell, formerly known as Fort Rucker. We got quite a task ahead of us today, as I am the only pilot doing the pre-flight on this helicopter. We got to take these good old blade ropes off, got to take some engine plugs out and the UAS cover off. So it will probably take me longer than usual, as I am the only one doing this. Just like any good pilot, always have your checklist on you when you're pre-flighting. No matter how many times you've done it, nobody's perfect. You could easily skip over things. Even though most of us that have been flying this girl for a while have a flow down, which I do. I'm sure a lot of people that have flown for a while do as well. Something unique about today's video is I'm in uniform. Normally I'm not, but I'm doing aviator duty, so I will be wearing my cotton wool Nomex mix, as any good aviator always does. And before any pre-flight, let's throw a little Zen 6 milli in. Make me a little more focused between the ears. All right. First things first, you're going to remove all tie downs from the aircraft. I just realized I could pre-flight this because we're not going to actually fly this. So I'm just going to take the blade ropes, as you see how I got them, where they don't drag on the ground, because we only have to look at the tail rotor. But pretty much I could leave pretty much all of the flyaway gear on the aircraft and still be able to give you guys a good tutorial on how to pre-flight. So to save myself time, that is what I'm going to do. But obviously, if we were really flying this aircraft, we would take all of the tie downs off. That goes without saying. Anyways, let's get into it. So the first thing we have is the nose section. This is the nose section of the HH. We're gonna get down here, check, make sure our lights are not extended and in. Take a look at that. All looks normal. And come to the nose section. Take a glance up at the windshield, make sure everything still looks like a helicopter. Gotta undo these little screws. And let's open her up. All right, we got her opened up. So for here, we're just looking for general condition and standard of everything. The main thing that's kind of common to see, I won't say common, but if anything is weird on pre-flighting the nose, typically these battery cables right here that connect to the slab batteries, they might be undone because they were doing some type of testing on it. I've seen that a few times. If they are undone, you can simply just put them back in and screw them back on. Very easy fix. First thing I typically always do, I take a glance, look at the general condition of everything, make sure everything looks normal, nothing looks out of place. All of the parts that I'm looking for are there. Typically take and press to test the ESIS battery. So you have your two batteries, that's your mini SDC, and that is your ARC 231 radio, EGI2, EGI1, and your FCC2 with your ESIS battery. The ESIS battery is what goes to the ESIS backup HSI in the cockpit. All of this looks good, so we can close this up and move on to the next section. All right, next thing you're doing is you're gonna walk over here to the co-pilot side, open the door up. Obviously, that pitot cover would be removed. Come over here. Pins and debris like to fall into here, so it's always a good idea to check your pedal boots, make sure those are good. One technique that I do is I always take the adjustment to the pedals and I'll pull them in like that, and I'll give them a good lockout. The reason I do that is typically I just want to make sure that adjusts right. I've had a flight once where you could adjust it, but it would never lock. And if I check it on pre-flight, we could potentially get that fixed before the flight or jump to another aircraft. So that's something I always check. And then you can go ahead and kind of just stage your stuff if you're going to be flying on this side. As you can see, the seatbelt's already kind of staged. So yeah, just checking around, make sure there's no debris, nothing's out of place, everything works as advertised as far as the co-pilot side in the cockpit. Let's move on to the next section. All right, let's get our step out so we can check the hydraulic deck. All right, we got our hydraulic deck opened up, and we're going to obviously check for general conditions and standard, make sure everything looks the way that it's supposed to. Check the generators, make sure they're the color they're supposed to be, and then move on to the pumps themselves. So this is a bypass button right here. If it's popped, obviously need to make it right up and need to replace the bypass and the pump. So both of these are in as they should be. You want to check the temperature labels. Right here it's white. If these dots turn black, that indicates temperature changes. For this, you want to make sure that the one that says 270 degrees Fahrenheit is not black. If it is black, there needs to be a -13 write-up made. All of these look good. Next thing you're going to do is check the reservoir window. You're looking at this gold band, the outboard gold band, as the -10 says, and it's in the green. If it's in the black, it's over-serviced, and if it's in the red, it needs to be reserviced. So you have the coffee can over there, you can pump more hydro into here. It is allowed to be 3/8 of an inch after being flown into the black. That's because pressure builds in the hydraulic pump. So if it's only 3/8 of an inch, it doesn't need to be deserviced or anything. You just kind of let it cool down and it'll typically go back to the green. All right, so we checked that pump. Let's check the backup pump. Those bypass buttons are still in. Looking here, that gold band is fine. Pump looks good. Temp labels, checking the temp labels, and those look good. All right, coming over here, I will typically slide this out. And now I'm looking at the servo system. So I take a glance at the servo system, just make sure nothing is bent or nothing is broken, and they all look normal. You just kind of have to develop an eye for this. Coming over here, I'm taking a look at the number 2 pump. Those buttons look good on the number 2 pump, right there and right there. They're in the same spot on both, or on all 3 pumps. I'm looking at the gold band there, and it is in the green, so that one is good to go. The next thing you're going to check on the hydraulic deck, it might be easier if we move this back, this platform. Sorry if my camera's going crazy, trying my best here. Is, I'll see down there that red button right there, that's another bypass. You want to check that, make sure that's in as well. You want to take a look at the pilot assist servos, make sure all of those look good. Nothing's bent, nothing's broken, everything's attached. And I'd call this hydraulic deck pretty good for pre-flight. She looks healthy girl. All right, on to the next. All right, next thing you want to do is we're checking the main rotor system. So one thing that whenever I'm standing up here I like to do is I like to just give a blade a look over, make sure there's like no obvious cracks or damage that shouldn't be there, because this is going to be like the one time that you can actually see the tops of the blades good. And then the next thing I'm coming for in here is I'm looking at these dampeners. So these dampeners, you see this gold band right here, you want to be able to see the gold band. If you can't see the gold band, it needs to be serviced. That one looks good. Let's go over to this one. That one looks good. See the gold band, good. So what they do to service these, to get that gold band to show, they pump it with hydro. Get that gold band to come out. That one's got a gold band. One's got a gold band. It looks good. Looks good. Healthy helicopter so far from what I've seen. All right, next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna come in here, check the oil level in the transmission system. Oh yeah, she looks good. She looks good. Just what we're looking for right there. When you take that out, you want to make sure that cap is on there good. And then I always come over here, I'll take these scissor links and I'll give them a good shake. Make sure there's no free play or anything in them. Those look good. All right, next thing you want to do is you want to open this compartment right here. Start looking at these shafts. Oh, right here. I want to make sure this shaft is good. These screws are torqued down, nothing's out of place, no bulging, no twisting or anything. It's an important piece right there. Hooks to the transmission system. The other thing you're going to look for in here is you see these little 3 fingers. These are the wear indicators on your rotor brake. You want to make sure they're not flush and they're sticking out. That right there is your rotor brake pump there. And then just give it a good look over. Make sure nothing looks broken or out of place or anything like that. That's mainly one of the things that we're looking for. So right here you got your pneumatic system going from the APU, the engine, and your cross bleed, the other engine. This compartment looks good. All right, on to the next. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up. Doesn't matter what engine compartment you do first. I'm going to do this one. This is the number 1 engine. All right, first thing I'm doing when I come in here, take a look at that oil level. Looks good. It's above the add line. That's what we're looking for. Next thing I'm going to do is come up. I'm going to check this bypass. Make sure the bypass isn't popped. Over here, there's another bypass. Make sure that bypass isn't popped. Come over here. Make sure she's attached to the fuselage. Then give the PAS and LDS a good tug. Make sure those things aren't loose or anything. Don't want those coming out in flight. Those look good. Next thing I'm going to do, look down there, take a look at the DECs. Make sure those look good. Good, and then one thing I like to also do, I need to come over here and make sure this oil cap is good and pushed down and it's not going anywhere. Now we check the bypasses, oil level, PAS and LDS. Looks good. Call this one good to go. All right. All right, check the other side. You'll have to excuse me. I'm not normally doing a pre-flight with a camera, so it's something I normally don't do. All right, See how that angle looks? It's good. So just so you guys can see, come in here, I'm checking the oil level. This oil level looks good. Cap is on. Notice the oil cap on this side is facing out. Give her all the S and PAS spindles a tug. Theirs are in there nice and snug. Looking at these brackets. General conditions and standards. As always, DEC looks good. Temperature label looks good. No write-ups necessary. And then I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna check the bypasses. Bypasses are good. All right, on to the next. All right, another thing you wanna do, just wanna make sure this little latch right here, sometimes they'll have little screws right here that you can tighten. This one is just safety wired, but you want to make sure this little hatch right here isn't flapping. Next thing, check the APU. And typically open all these up at the same time. So check our APU oil levels. Looks good. As you can see, that oil is clear. It's good. And then coming here, I'm checking the drive shaft, making sure there's no twisting or bulging in the drive shaft. It's a very important part of the helicopter right there. And this one looks pretty good. Sometimes I like to look at these little flex packs. That's not something talked about, but I always do it. Maybe it's superstition, I don't know. Fire bottles look good. There's a little chart you can compare it to. I know these are good because I pre-flight in this area all the time, and that's right where they're always at, which is in the normal ranges. All right. All right, next thing you want to do, make sure your antennas look like they should be. No screws are missing or they're not hanging off or anything like that. And what I like to do is, if you ever heard of the term top 10, you're checking all 10 latches up top. We do this before the flight, but after I get done pre-flighting the top, I typically just count them. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Come over here. A hydraulic deck. 9, 10. They're all latched. All right, let's get down. All right, next thing I'm doing, I'm coming here, taking a look at the wheel. Looks good. General conditions and standard. Looking at the tread. It's your wear indicator for your brakes. Make sure those are out. Brakes look good. All right, I'm coming over here. Coming up, I'm going to check our APU accumulator. There's a gauge up there. And you typically want that to say 2800 PSI, which it's dead on 2800. Try to get that in there so you can see. So that one looks good. It's not 2800. Definitely seen them start with much less than 2800, but if you want to get real crazy, you can use the rod and pump your APU up. I'll show you where that is actually. See that right there? There's a rod in here. Not sure where it is right now. Connected into there. You can manually pump up your APU accumulator. That's where the byte codes are if you have an APU fault. Those of you guys who are studying the warnings, notes, and cautions will be familiar with where that is talked about in the checklist. Here, come up here, you see that? It's your gust lock. Pull your gust lock. You don't want that in startup. For purposes of today, I'm going to push it back in because we're not actually flying this aircraft. So the gust lock is in. And then come over here, you're gonna check your transmission bypass button, and it is in. You don't want it popped out. Come over here. On a fire extinguisher, typically the crew dogs take that. So it's around. I'm gonna check your first aid kits. Got 1, 2, 3. Check the dates on those. Make sure the date is not expired on it. Come over here. Door sliding open. Close that. Come over here. It's your refuel. It's another refuel port. You open this up, you'll see a siphon hose. I'm not going to do it today because I don't feel like smelling like JP8. But you take that siphon hose, you take your fuel sample jar. Oh, I'm struggling. Take your fuel sample jar. When you open this, there is a tube. You'll see it right when you open it. You take the end of that siphon, you run it down that tube until you hit the bottom, and then you start pumping. And it'll shoot fuel into your jar. You want to get a decent amount of fuel in that jar, and you then will stop, hold it up, make sure there's no bubbles that form around the bottom of that jar. Water is heavier than JP8, so it will seep to the bottom. That's why you want to run your hose all the way down to the bottom, because if there is water in it, it's going to be at the bottom. And that's how you do your fuel sample. So we'll close this bad boy up. Make sure all these latches are in. Here, your buddy hose hookup for your pneumatic system. Always make sure that these aren't open. You want to dump your APU. Always look in the APU exhaust. Obviously, it's not a good day if that's in there when you start the APU. But again, I'm not going to remove the flyaway gear for just a little pre-flight if we're not flying. All right, go into the tail section. I'm going to undo these latches. All right, and just like I always say, you're checking for general condition and standard. No twisting, no bulging. Always like to run my hand down it. This one looks good. Looks good. Things sticking out, impeding its way for when it starts spinning. We'll close these bad boys up. You want to come down here. It's your tail wheel. You want to make sure your tail wheel pin is in, which it is. If it's not, the aircraft will want to twist on startup because of that torque going through the system. So this is in. That's good. Take a look at your tires, your tread. This one's aired up nicely. That's what we like to see. And then coming over here, check your oil. Make sure it's in. I don't know if you can see it very good, but there is a little red bullseye there. You want to make sure that oil is at least in the center of that bullseye. Always come here and always check, make sure the cap is good and on. Then come over here, I'll pop that out. And then I'm looking at my stave. Looking at my stave. Sure she looks good. Sure there's no play in there. Which there's not. Coming over here. Checking those stabilizer servos. It's good. It's good. Making sure no birds have burrowed into the stabilizer section. Looks good. Coming over here, taking a look, making sure those pins and cotter pins are in. Looking on the top. Oh, she looks good. All right, coming over here. Stand. And I'll see you guys up at the tail. All right, up at the tail section. Let's do our tail section pre-flight. All right, you guys are not going to be able to see this, but I'm sticking my hand in this section. I'm feeling for a cap, making sure a cap is on in there. Moving over, making sure these lights are attached. There's no crack or water built up in them. Then I'm coming over here. And if you guys can remember, the gust lock is in, so these blades are not going to turn. But for pre-flight purposes, you would turn and check all of these tail rotor blades. But for the purposes of this video, I will just talk you to what you're checking for. So checking these de-ice cannon plugs, making sure those are seated properly. You're then checking for these brackets, making sure there's no cracking or wear or the screws aren't broken on these brackets. And then I will typically, especially on cold days, normally only on cold days, I'll give these blades a tug. Make sure there's no like ice formed around these boots. Water likes to kind of get in there and freeze. And if you can move them, I'll typically crack that up, and it won't be a problem when you start the aircraft up. Right here, these are your tail rotor balance washers that the MTPs will put on to do our tail rotor balance. I think this is the only area that has them. That's more of an MTP's lane, but you're just making sure that these screws are on good. And the main concern is any cracking or damage to the tail rotor blades, and you're going to do that for every single one as you turn them. It's pretty much it with the tail rotor section. Again, checking for general conditions and standard, making sure nothing's out of place and everything looks the way that it's supposed to be. Now, also, before I forget, there's a window right here. You want to make sure that you can see oil in this window. Here you can, and that's what you want to see. All right, let's get down. All right, tracing up from the tail section. You are going to come to this avionics bay. Let's get this bad boy open. All right, coming in here, want to make sure your avionics bay door is properly situated. Coming in here, it's going to be hard to see, guys, so just bear with me. The main thing I'm going to look for here, general conditions and standards, right? Make sure everything looks the way it is, nothing's broken, no loose wires hanging or anything. This is the FCC number 1. You have your 201 radio. The other one is under the seat with another 231 right here. Another thing you're going to check here, if you want to come up here, make sure these are safety wired or secured. These cables, I run from right here along that pulley system. They connect right here. So you just want to make sure these are safety wired properly, sorry. A lot of the newer ones have clips. Just make sure they're either clipped or safety wired. Everything in here looks pretty much in place the way that it's supposed to look. Let's get out of here, it's kind of hot. All right, coming up through here. Check your tires. Same thing you did on the other side. Already talked you guys through this. Wear indicators for the brakes. Checking them, making sure those look good. Coming over. Pilot side door. Remember what I said about the pedals. Always like to give those a good check. Make sure they lock in. Checking inside of the pedals, make sure there's no pins. That's the main thing you see. Pins or pencils, debris, all that shenanigans. Those look good. Stage your stuff. And then, yeah. So we just ran through the whole pre-flight as far as the external portion goes. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, you get into a flow, you know what needs to be checked, and you know what right looks like, just over time and experience, and you'll get the hang of it. Now, on your first nickel ride day, if you will, with your IP when you get to low, they are going to walk you through the same pre-flight we just did. So listen to every single thing they say and do it the way they teach you. Obviously, you have a checklist. Read the checklist, and like I said, you'll develop a flow over time, and everybody has their own little methods in accordance with the checklist. So stay tuned for the next video, and as always, like, subscribe, and thanks for supporting the channel.